Everyone thought Daniel Voss was a genius. Not the warm, inspiring kind, the cold, calculating kind. The kind of man who always seemed 10 steps ahead, whose eyes never revealed emotion, whose words were chosen with surgical precision. In the corporate world, he was admired. In personal circles, he was feared. People called him the psycho who planned everything. And honestly, it wasn't far from the truth. Daniel didn't believe in chance. Every meeting, every conversation, every decision. He planned it all. He mapped outcomes in his head like a chessboard. Even friendships, if he had any, felt more like strategic alliances. But no one knew why he was like this. Not until the day everything began to unravel. It started with a new hire. Her name was Amina. She wasn't extraordinary in the way Daniel understood. She wasn't ruthless, didn't speak in calculated tones, didn't try to impress anyone. In fact, she seemed almost out of place in a high-pressure firm like theirs. She smiled too much. Helped people too easily. And worst of all, she didn't seem to expect anything in return. Daniel noticed her immediately, not because she stood out, but because she didn't fit into his system. He had already mapped every employee in the office. Who was ambitious, who was lazy, who could be trusted, who couldn't. But Amina, she didn't follow patterns. That made her unpredictable. And Daniel hated unpredictability. So he did what he always did. He studied her. For days, then weeks. He watched how she stayed late, not for recognition, but to help others finish their work. How she brought tea for the janitor without being asked. How she listened, really listened, when people spoke, even when it didn't benefit her. It didn't make sense. Kindness, in Daniel's world, was always transactional. But hers wasn't. So he devised a plan. He would test her. Carefully. Quietly. Precisely. He started small. One evening, he deliberately left an important file on her desk with errors that would cause serious issues if submitted. He knew she would find it. The question was, what would she do? The next morning, the file was back on his desk. Corrected. No note. No mention. No credit claimed. He checked the security footage just to be sure. She had stayed nearly 2 extra hours fixing his work. Without telling anyone. Without expecting anything. Daniel frowned. That wasn't logical. So he escalated. Over the next few weeks, he created situations, subtle, controlled scenarios designed to expose selfishness. He assigned her impossible deadlines. She still helped others. He gave her tasks outside her role. She completed them quietly. He ignored her contributions in meetings. She didn't protest. Instead, she smiled. Every single time. It irritated him more than failure ever could. One afternoon, he decided to confront her directly. "Why do you do it?" he asked, standing by her desk. She looked up, slightly confused. "Do what?" "All of it," he said, his voice sharp. "Helping people who won't help you back. Fixing problems that aren't yours. Staying late for no reward." She thought for a moment. Then she shrugged lightly. "Because it makes things easier for everyone," she said. "Including me." "That's not how the world works," Daniel replied flatly. She tilted her head. "Maybe not. But it's how I choose to work." Her answer lingered in his mind longer than he expected. That night, Daniel went home and reviewed everything again. Every interaction. Every test. Every result. The conclusion didn't change. She was genuinely kind. Not naive. Not strategic. Just kind. And for the first time in years, Daniel couldn't understand something. It bothered him. So he planned one final test. The kind that would reveal everything. He orchestrated a situation where Amina would be blamed for a major mistake. One that could cost her job. He manipulated emails, shifted timelines, and created a narrative so convincing that no one would question it. Except him. He watched as the situation unfolded. The management called her into a meeting. Voices were raised. Accusations were made. Daniel stood outside, listening. Waiting. This was the moment. The moment she would defend herself. Expose others. Protect her position. Because that's what everyone did. That's what he would have done. But when she came out of the meeting, her eyes were red. And yet, she didn't look angry. She looked worried. Not for herself. For the team. She didn't mean to push all that work on me, Amina was saying to a colleague softly. I think she was just overwhelmed. Daniel froze. She wasn't even defending herself. She was protecting someone else. Even now. Even when it could cost her everything. Something cracked inside him. For years, Daniel had believed that people were predictable. Self-serving. Easy to map, easy to control. But this didn't fit any model. It wasn't strategy. It wasn't weakness. It was something else entirely. That night, Daniel didn't sleep. He sat in his apartment, staring at the city lights, replaying every moment. And for the first time, he saw himself clearly. Not as a genius. Not as a mastermind. But as someone who had spent his entire life protecting himself from a world he never truly understood. His plans weren't strength. They were fear. The next morning, he did something no one expected. He walked into the office early. Accessed the system and reversed everything. Every manipulated email. Every altered timeline. Then he walked straight into the manager's office. I made a mistake, he said calmly. The truth came out. Not partially. Not strategically. Completely, the consequences were immediate. Reputation damaged. Trust broken. But Daniel didn't try to fix it. For once, he didn't have a plan. Later that day, he found Amina sitting quietly at her desk. She looked up, surprised. You didn't have to do that, she said softly. Yes, I did, he replied. There was a pause. Then he added, I thought I understood people. I thought everything was predictable. But he shook his head slightly. You don't make sense. She smiled gently. Maybe not everything needs to make sense. He hesitated, then asked something he had never asked anyone before. How do you do it? Do what? Stay kind, he said. Even when it hurts. She looked at him for a long moment. Because someone has to, she said. And because, sometimes it changes things. Daniel didn't respond. But something in him shifted. Slowly. Subtly. But permanently. Over the next few months, people began to notice changes. Daniel still planned. Still analyzed. But he started leaving room for something else. He listened more. Interrupted less. Helped, quietly, without recognition. Not because it was efficient. But because, he wanted to understand. And maybe, in his own way, to become something different. The office still whispered about him. They still called him the psycho who planned everything. But they didn't see the small moments. The quiet choices. The subtle acts of kindness that didn't fit his old patterns. And Daniel didn't correct them. Because for the first time in his life, he wasn't trying to control the narrative. He was learning to live without one. And somehow, that felt like the most unpredictable, and most human thing he had ever done.